And so, of course, we had some programming changes to be able to have some different ceremonies and pujas to honor Rinpoche. And now also turning the Dharma wheel is honoring Rinpoche as well. So we are resuming our regular classes. So yeah, please let friends know. And we are also going to continue with various prayers and practices for Rinpoche's swift return. So this week it will be on Wednesday, but to allow Geshe and myself to participate, because we both have school stuff on Wednesday and Geshe on Wednesday evening, we're actually going to shift that after this week to Thursdays. So stay tuned to our website and you can find all of that information. In terms of programming, we are nearing the end of the King of Prayers presentation. So when this will end, I'm not sure. I don't want to rush Geshe too much because I think he still thinks there's some nice nuggets in some of the verses that haven't been covered yet. But I would estimate in 2 to 3 weeks, the King of Prayers will be finished. And in terms of the next text, we thought to do the 7-point mind training, the Lojong Dunduma. And so that will go together with Lama Tsongkhapa's In Praise of Dependent Arising until that text is finished. And then after that, we are thinking of Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. Oh, okay. Yes. So, one more thing. So the Chakra Samvara commentary will continue next weekend, Saturday. For those who are, I got a few emails from people who were saying, you know, that they're connecting more with the Vajrayogini practice. I encourage you to come next Saturday in particular. I encourage you to come generally, but next Saturday in particular, because Geshe will be giving commentary on the Vajrasattva practice, the Vajrasattva Yabhyum, which is common to both of those practices. Another thing, I also got quite a few requests in my email for, can Geshe give a presentation on Vajrayogini? Because Khenso Rinpoche Losang Delek gave that initiation. So Geshe said that it's important to be patient and start what we finish. So he wants to keep the Chakra Samvara commentary until that's finished. However, he has agreed to at least give an overview to Vajrayogini over 1 or maybe 2 classes. So that will probably be in June or July. And just the last thing, in terms of local community, we will be having 2 presentations from Geshe in May and June at the Burlington Public Library, but that will also be streamed for folks at home. And then I think on the 30th of May will be 49 days since Lama Zopa Rinpoche entering his final meditation, which means that we'll probably have some kind of special event, a big ceremony, or maybe some talks and things like that. So stay tuned for all of that. And I see that we are now 5 minutes after, so I will invite Geshe down and we'll get started. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, Dave,
Yeah,
I just got in. Can you repeat what Kedrip just said?
he said quite a bit.
Or can you update me later?
Yeah. It's basically all on our website,
Okay.
or it will be coming in a website newsletter. Yeah. In the
Good morning, everyone.
Can everybody hear Geshe-la's voice? That's Geshe. Did you hear? Okay, great. It's nice to hear Geshe-la's voice too. For the Tibetan folks, there's a couple here I noticed, but also for, just generally. So first of all, greetings to all Dharma friends. I hope that you're all well and I hope that you're all happy. Ale loso. Yeah, he's just noticing the angle. Sometimes it will fall down when it's like that. So we're just adjusting the blinds. We have something very unusual happening at Lama Yeshe Ling, which is that on a Sunday there's actually a couple of people here. But I think that's good enough. Yeah. 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 So just making sure the sun isn't on people's face. Okay, loso. So in terms of our gathering today, all of us coming together today, we are gathered together today to seek after the very best kind of happiness. And to have the result of perfect happiness, we understand we also need to accumulate the perfect causes of that happiness. And in terms of having the facility to be able to accumulate the causes of that perfect happiness, having this human rebirth, as well as our human mind and intelligence, it is the very best basis for accumulating those causes. And so we say it is more precious than many wish-fulfilling jewels. And so if we were to have to enumerate the reasons of why this human life is more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, there are actually many reasons why this is the case. And it is on the basis of recognizing the opportunity we have and activating this vast mind and intelligence, using it in the correct way, that even other sentient beings will look at us and think, oh, that person has achieved something more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So then on the basis of starting from where we are and working with this narrow mind, taking our ways of thinking and building this vast mind, vaster, vaster, and vaster, then we can become someone who works for all sentient beings, not only ourselves, but also for others. And in this way, our life becomes more precious than a wish-granting jewel. And in terms of these causes of happiness that were mentioned, we have the causes of happiness that are seen as well as unseen causes. And out of those causes that are seen and unseen, it's particularly the unseen ones that are important. And those are very much related to the ways of thinking that we bring forth in our mind. I notice maybe that our screen is in such a way that like Geshe-la's face is very far away and you can't see him well. Is it possible to zoom a little bit? Just for the folks at home. That's better, a little bit more. There we go. Yes, okay. Yeah. Just felt like maybe Geshe-la feels a bit far away from you guys. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Disney.
Decent.
Oh, that the Chile, that 20 just in Arusu without Miss Pegasus, or not to the Ganzo Pashi 200, which you are.
And so then in terms of those seen causes of happiness, these are easier to identify, right? Because they're recognizable. They're something we see with our eyes.
Oh, that Dig Koropagin is 20 what then the 2 years, Naruso Yabuchena.
And because we can see them, then it is very easy to take those causes and to work on transforming them.
Oh, that is no, Nis Matui just another le do Senosiatres. Kachimbo.
And in terms of the unseen causes, when we speak of these, we mostly speak of things like karma and merit.
Oh, Penangaros Chimbots, they are Rusos getting Lindeon. Pugledo Yamuni, like a chiguaret, so should check at it, and it cut you just should check at the letters.
So when we speak of this human rebirth we have now, we spoke about it in the positive sense. But if we speak of it from a more critical perspective, we say that this body is the result of karma and affliction. And from the point of view of the cause which is important, in one way of looking at it, we say that karma, cause and effect, is the more immediate cause.
Oh, young Arosu, ten Litza Chimotella, Jim Momboyar, so the Dapichi is related to Chichuares.
And so when we speak about karma, we can also speak about causes and conditions. And the dominant condition is that one which is the cause, which is the karma in that sense.
Oh, Dapichi is an Arosu Daposigaras, or Dabojakit or Sigares, Unchadamo Yokit.
And so what is translated as dominant condition, it's actually in Tibetan the Daupö Kien, which is almost like the self cause. So these are the causes that we accumulate with ourselves as the agent.
Oh, that take Korotami, that take Lichibomares, Matsen Digishawa, Chijukandi, China, Pusuba Yodo, Mayo, Sad, Ledu Senol Pugentawa, Chimbochi Yares.
And also, when we think about things like karma and merit, we don't necessarily need to think of these in terms of something that unfolds very far away. We can also see that all of the things that we're able to accomplish or be successful in this life, this is also very much related to our karma and merit.
Oh, that said, Nigia is a Sunjia, Sunji de Ina, she was Jimani package, Manduas, Seno de May, Somba no Jundo, Seri, Naroso, Pegaseno Kaze Dembaina. Leg yoga to Kazichegayana, may send diggers on Baina, upon
And it is with this understanding that we find in the scriptures of the Buddha the importance of merit. In fact, it is said that one who possesses a great treasury of merit can accomplish his or her wishes exactly as they aspire.
Oh, that Ndigan Kanga, Shipiton and Arosata, Pegay, Yanodasaramadu, she and Damanda Mombochile, Yungretin, so Shalun Zagumatuaji, so wrong on to tend in the rich noso, the Latin Yodatis, some Kazeta, the Sinzaku Tobayan.
So then Geshe said that in terms of sort of how we are approaching things, when we encounter obstacles, when we encounter things that are difficult, we often see that from the external perspective, right? This situation or this person is causing the problem. So what we encourage you to do is actually to look inward and to see that actually this obstacle is arising due to this negative action. This obstacle is arising due to this negative way of thinking, and really sort of turn the attention to the causality inward.
Shalula Tesi do Yari, and so Jalan Damanda, May Tenis, Yapag non-gen, Yalekacheton Damandala Tene, Kangetene Yungaras, Kangele Pigal, oh, that Shulu owns a Gamatua, so so no toto, Legacheto, or no so. No, the country you met,
So then when we encounter these problems, of course, it may be encountered on the basis of a difficult person or on the basis of a difficult situation or a problem in our environment. But rather than thinking that it is solely something that is this external cause of the difficulty, we should turn the gaze upon ourselves and think, this situation arose because of my previous negative actions. This situation is continuing because of my way of thinking. And in other words, to build an introspective approach to dealing with this. And then on this basis, on the basis of this good brain or intelligence, what we're able to do is make our mindset something vaster and vaster.
어다게 좀 모쳤으니 알에 던지지래. 다 돈보 알랭한서 달리도 셀헬레 지는 때야 땡보 헬레 그건디스.
So that was a little bit of a longer introduction, and now as we begin the session, let us just take a moment to relax, to focus our body and mind.
리세 대화니 비티는데 다 파게 헬레치 봐서 내기 선바지스.
To bring forth wellness in the body and mind, we will allow ourselves to relax.
저 처음에봐 너도 처음에봐 가르 이나요 다 강가로로파 dimbalüge tebano yipa yinro yin rambajide yinro gandu sambaji.
Whatever feelings are disturbing us, whatever mental projections and so forth may be disturbing us, just imagine that they are like clouds in the sky, and with the gentle breeze of our attention, they are cleared away.
손서 야가도 누가 공용 그게 니 맞으니 파자비가라 세대 뚜냐고 몰라 할래 세된다고 지가레스.
When we're not chasing after the thoughts, whether wholesome or unwholesome, we can stop the busyness of the mind. The mind abides in a state of neutral equanimity, and this helps us to still, to relax the mind.
공요 소노마 돈에 대바이는 니까지 헬렌다고 진도이테네 테네 셈 야진도야 만디스.
However, if we just stay in this state of not thinking of anything in particular, in this state of neutrality, that's not going to be the basis for a long-term improvement of the mind.
가로소스 전에 셈세야데도 나 세대야 할래 로저 야보 좀바도 이지슈를 가제파 로와이네트니 로토야게네츠 지와레스.
When we think of that we call the self and that we call my mind, they also possess tremendously positive potential. We want to use that potential to direct our mind into the nature of what is wholesome, such as love and compassion.
다요 타빌로로 요만로 같이 니모고 슐카디 이나 거의 니모고 다 요번라고 디골 데바이나 카디 이나 거의 녀다텔 타야만디스.
As long as we don't embark upon the path of liberation, we remain the servant of the afflictions. And as long as we remain the servant of the afflictions, there cannot be stable happiness.
소소솔 제와야 소소솔했더니 가르세가리 어니지나와 아이자 이니 멘지다 코알이 타와 타비쇼를 다니몰이 타와 쇼진로 그도 소마지.
If we have true compassion for ourselves, if we have true concern for ourselves, we must think, I need to be free from samsara, from cyclic existence. I need to embark on the path towards liberation. That is what I must achieve.
대용으로 소소 나나세 다 첨보이자 다 타와야 쇼지기 쇼는 도야 갈래가 가서 뜻 때문에 지기 tellasonjudo shonje sambasuina shala yuachi so atagi sombachi.
Because I see the self, the I, as something important, worthy of taking care of, then I must strive for the supreme liberation to benefit myself and others. I request the blessings of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas to be able to do this.
Oyanti fachi.
Yes.
So hatari lakacha
Sorry.
Geshe ba da chomba yonda ba zobe sanje reba dan shabsu demba dewa sheba shite chemba chebu doye kalo gyorwa lana meba lada minangi temba songye chomdende pejawa shaja tubala Shazalo chedo gyabsu chi ho Temba chomdende teji jeba jachomba yonda ba zobe sangye jeba dan shabsu demba dewa sheba jiden jemba chebu doye kalo gyorwa lana meba Adami nangi temba sangye chomdende pejawa shakya tubala chazelo cheda gyabsu chi.
So do the short mandala offering. Refuge in bodhicitta.
Sanje chedon soge chenam la janchu bardo dane kyapsu chi dagi chinje jibe sonam ge jola benjir sangye jobar sho
Chedan sogi chenam la Jamchu bardu dani gyabzu chi Dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi Jola penjir sangi jobar sho Chedan sogi chenam la Jamchu bardu dani gyabzu chi Dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi Jola penjir sangi jobar sho
Hoya, 다 때문에 당긴 거 말라봐 노지 다 가로서 저 퍼스수바 뭐뭐 저 발라다티 저저야 다 사체준다고 니했다네 단단간조 슐러 같은 요아레스.
So, as Geshe mentioned in the introduction, then, in order to achieve this perfect happiness, we need to accumulate many of the perfect causes, and at this current moment, we possess all of the conditions that will allow us to do that.
어다 로 가로서 버게 다 사자도 마서는 다 리요아쇼 녀다 체네 메사 소소요 녀다 체네 메사 예용 녀다 체네 메사질 티토야 사자질 로그요아레스.
So what we need to do is use this body and these conditions in this place to be able to lead not only ourselves, but also to be able to lead others to a state, to a place where they will experience no problems at all.
어다 야 노지 야 시라니 뭐는 야바 노지 전지 셈바 쳔보 자 세근도 왔어.
So then in the Heart Sutra, you see that we speak of the Bodhisattva, the great being, or the Bodhisattva Mahasattva.
전지 셈바 로데치네 소노 모토케서 또 소노 또 해야 말이야. 뭐지 되는 노도 야.
younger
전지 셈바 세레 예조조 소노 또 로데 소노 모토케 데로 세야 말이야.
So many people think perhaps the Bodhisattva is someone who is continuously working for the benefit of others, but he or she does not pay any attention to their own welfare. And this might create some difficulty, some tension in the mind. But in fact, this is not the case.
전지 셈바 쳔보 전지 셈바 세는 롱게 대한다요. 버게스테네 토자 퍼스수바 야치 세기와레스.
But when we speak of the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, these two words, Bodhisattva, the first name, Bodhisattva, Jangchub Sempa, this is achieving the condition for one's own welfare. And because one's own welfare, the self-welfare, is very important, Bodhisattva, Jangchub Sempa, comes before Mahasattva, Jangchub Sempa Chenpo.
다 전지 셈바 메 셈바 치서도
셈바 쳔보.
셈바 쳔보 세나 로데 또 많이 봐 예대용 되는 벌써 좀 저기 셈바 쳔보 세게 잘해요.
Mahasattva, or great being, Sempa Chenpo, following Bodhisattva, this is one who works not only for one's own welfare, but works towards achieving the perfect welfare of others. So that's what we mean when we say Bodhisattva Mahasattva.
다 노지지야 시에서는 또 대한테 저 롱 진짜 제나 롱제 니깔다 내게 요래 어때 맞지에서 바꿔게 요래 마도 단에 롱게 된도 소는 마도 어때서 요.
So when we speak about the Bodhisattva, the mindset of the Bodhisattva, we understand that self-cherishing is what the Bodhisattva is trying to abandon, right? That selfish kind of mind. But actually, in terms of their own welfare, the Bodhisattva is striving for their own welfare, but placing as more important working for the welfare of others.
다 될 때는 다 저기도 다 토자 되는 게 단계라바 노지 아니 롱제 감각 끼워 타투지는 로 하셔발라 로 노알에 쳐봤든지 샹도 로 멤버를 쳐봤든지 세시에서 걸어보게 따따지요 하레스.
And in order to be able to achieve that object of attainment, that final result that we are thinking, what do we have to do? We have to engage in the perfect path. And this is where the practice of refuge, which allows us to abandon a faulty path in favor of a correct path, and the practice of the mind generation, which allows us to abandon a limited path in favor of a vast path, are very important.
tani shandroga yetel아요. 저 고다 로바체키 고자가 찬내라 tani 샤스도 예조다고 니 손지게죠 겐드게죠. 아니 샤 니임비 찬이 다 종이네 버게 대왕 타투게 대왕 이네테 도게들 샤 니세기요. 될 치게죠 세기도 왔어.
And when we go for refuge, right, we go for refuge to the three jewels. So when we think of two of these jewels, the Buddha jewel and the Sangha jewel, we're thinking of persons, or we could say we are thinking of beings. But in terms of the actual refuge, that which will allow us to achieve the supreme happiness of liberation, the actual refuge is the Dharma jewel, the teachings themselves.
오다 샤 니세한테 오다 알게 잘했는데 와서 오다 된다 손질을 샤 땜바보로 야보질 거 튀긴 비 찬이라 아니 샤 땜바보인 비 찬 샤스도와.
So the Dharma is the actual refuge. The Buddha jewel is the teacher of refuge. He is the good guide who leads us along the path of Dharma.
다 겐디 겐초서는 오다 코로로 버시로 받치게 늘어서 가는 늘어서 안 도가래서 그런 거만 다는 양로와 노지징아서 로바시게 드레스.
The Sangha jewels are the helpers along the path who, based upon their own experience, they say, this is what you should cultivate, this is what I cultivated, and this is what you must abandon. So someone's asking the page, we're not there yet. I'll let you know when we come to the text in the page. 남서 쇼크랑 가츠레사.
다시 니세는 뭐 하고서라 다 강에 니네 벽에 매워서 게 내도 마스는 맹년에 가르쳐 시키게 줘대. 다 할래하게 내서지.
And the actual refuge is the Dharma jewel, the jewel of the teachings. And the teachings are like the actual method, the medicine which can cure this illness of samsara. So therefore it is the Dharma jewel which is supremely important.
어다타 버스 주바 시라 버스 주바 니디제나 데레 사대 니게다 나로 세대 주마 차총와 주마서 더요 하레스.
And when we speak of the Dharma jewel, we can think of the Dharma jewel as being the combination of the practice of method, the perfect practice of method, and the perfect practice of wisdom. And through this unified practice of method and wisdom, the mind can be completely purified. And so on the basis of that motivation, let us engage in another brief meditation before we do the text. So we know that the wellness of the body and the mind are very much connected with the harmony, the equilibrium of the elements within our body. So let us take a moment to settle those elements. So we think the elements are in equilibrium, and thus the body and the mind are at ease. But we want to settle this mind. We don't want this monkey mind that is running from object to object to object. We want to first settle that mind in focused stillness. So keep your focused attention merely on the breath. Breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out. Breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Whatever discursive, distracting thoughts are arising in the mind, just let them arise and fall away. Develop the intention, I'm not going to chase after those thoughts. I will not follow them.
대여롱게 초와도 tani se lim de ha ta sen kang yen rawa to er kan di ji yo ba ina yani lu hin no ba ge no ma rawa tani si jin des no ban rawa ji shong ge ni ka le yo song ba ji.
So we're going to do a visualization. Think whatever is disturbing my body, or whatever is causing disturbance within my mind. Those causes of mental or physical illness, they are in the form of like a dark, smoky light. And that dark, smoky light is sort of at the level of my heart in the central channel.
Tene yu shen ci tembe ka la rong ge nye do yu zu ge ani rong ge nye ta tu yi ten ji ge tene le ji ka nye san ji ka nye la so ba ka ga wi do nyon do ci le ge yo so ba ji.
So exhale, and then as we inhale, we imagine the beings surrounding us, those who are close to us as well as those who are not. Ideally, all sentient beings in the form of human beings, and we imagine that their troubles, difficulties, illnesses are in the form of a black, smoky light. And as we breathe in, we take all of that suffering in the form of that black, smoky light into ourselves.
Wi do nyon do la na ge no ni ma do ne tang ge ge na po ti tu la pa to ni la zhe zu sa me ba ji so ba le do nyon de chalo pa tes.
And as we breathe that in, we imagine from that compassionate act of taking on the suffering of others, that dark radiance at our own heart, our own difficulties, and so forth, dissolve. They become non-pinpointable. There is no essence that we can point at.
Wi pan ro bi ka la rong ge zhe wa do shong ba ani de yi cha kan di ji na yo ro wa sen ji yu zu lo pa ani jin ban ra wo ji ne pan ro so ba ji.
And from that transformation, the positive qualities are brought forth. And as we breathe out, we imagine that we breathe out brilliant colored lights that give our roots of virtue, all of our causes of happiness and positive mental qualities to the assembled sentient beings.
Corazon li de wa do se ki ba ji de do yin ro yo zu lo pa cha ba ji so to de yi chen ba ya po ji cha so ba.
And in this way, we think through receiving that positive energy, the lights from us, their bodies become well, their minds become happy, and they achieve peace. And then rejoice, thinking, I have brought great benefit to the assembled sentient beings.
So so ge de na yo zhe rong jin zhe de dan zhe ma ri ba dun de de gang ge kan de ji na yo ge na po de pan zhe ju sa me ba so cha ga yi za li de wa da se ki ba ji chua so ba.
And then think, not only have I brought happiness to the assembled sentient beings, but through taking on their suffering and transforming it, I have eradicated my self-cherishing attitude. I have eradicated the ignorance grasping at the self abiding at my heart. And in this way, my body and mind are peaceful and happy.
So so yi na yo de li de wa do se tem bi ngon ni la ro wa sen ji yu zu de pa so ba ji de to ba so yi so ba ji.
And think, from my body and mind becoming at ease and well, I will use this positive condition to constantly strive for the welfare of others, for the benefit of all beings.
Zo zo ten ji de pa so ba de ba la nga ro su nga se de ha de bo ani rong ge de yo ta shi ba yin ji de yo ta shi ma se ma jo ba de to mya yi sa de ta shi ma ji so yi so ba ji.
and think until that I call the I or the self reaches that state of ultimate enlightenment, the final goal, I will not be able to work meaningfully for my own welfare or for the benefit of others. Therefore, I must achieve that state. So as much as possible, bring forth this bodhicitta intention.
Tende dratawire, jisekarre sena senga rojina ge sawa, halaya page, zuma roji apochires. Tama nyamo kangalona pacha the jibat, lowo achire mat, tembore madu.
I think I definitely can achieve this state of supreme enlightenment. Why? Because the ultimate nature of my mind is pure luminosity. The defilements, the afflictions that disturb it are adventitious. They can be removed. They are not the mind's true, pure nature. So we'll pause the meditation there. So this is sort of a adapted version of Tonglen, of the taking and giving practice. It's not the completely traditional presentation, but it's an adapted one to give you the taste of this practice. And if we practice taking and giving while the body and mind are well, we'll be very prepared to really take it to the next level when things become difficult. Loso. Kebutambo kare sungyares. Loso. So there is a way to take on the suffering of others in the context of Tonglen, where you take that on and you maintain a mind of equanimity. And that is the way it is advised for the novice practitioner. However, as one becomes more advanced, the holy beings indicate you will not remain in that state of equanimity. So dunya gitsowa ngene yongi restonda. Re. Yabo komason. Sorry. So then, in terms of the breathing meditation, I apologize. In terms of the breathing meditation, Geshe presented two things. So the first of these was an adaptation of the anapanasati, right? The mindfulness of the breath. And this is to kind of build the state of relaxation within our mind. Then, on the basis of that, to build those positive qualities, we do the practice of Tonglen, of taking and giving. And before one becomes really skilled in this practice of Tonglen and perhaps is really able to take on the suffering of others, when we receive, right, that dark radiance and so forth into ourselves, representing beings suffering, we imagine that it actually destroys the self-cherishing and the ignorance grasping at the self that we hold at the heart. And this is a middle step, because actually if we do the Tonglen in the kind of truest sense, actually taking on the suffering of others, willing to experience them, and giving away every single cause that we have for happiness, for a novice practitioner, that can be something that's very difficult, right?
어다다 갈래갈다 돈에 걸게 좀 모여라 와서 다리 릴라와지레스 나가서
So there are many different ways to present the Tonglen, the taking and the giving practice, and Geshe presented one of the easier ways to practice it today.
다스는 셔도 고 가르자바 이나에 다 프레미 파테 테즈 니서완다바 테즈 슈안 레토 보이나 아니 테즈 슈안이나 tane lonso 딘디바치네 좌니라 lonso 파 고자 가레스 레토 보이나 미 파테즈 레소나 오다야 보슈서 som바슈나 미 파타네 솔로소 고자야 파자네 레레테 가레스 가레스.
And further instructions for meditation, perhaps we could say for the novice practitioner or for the less developed practitioner. We want to stop our meditation session at the point that we are still able to hold on to our object of focus, because we want to end the session with the feeling of, I did well today. I was able to maintain my concentration.
다 할레비 여보 소 여보 슈스타티 템보소기 아주 자데바이나 세르칼레 카사친고 자기슈나
Yeah.
tane 이마에 어디에서 바체 용기 알았어 가레스.
Because if things are going well, but then we make the session longer and longer and we run into problems, then we might think, oh, this practice is something very difficult, and that way of thinking can become an obstacle, right, to maintaining our practice.
다시부터 뭐 자시부터 마이나에 지지는 바시드는 연구에 살아와 스타드인다고 괜찮지 가레스. 또 자침보지 라마 자침보지가
Loso.
아니 거러그 바 유침보지 논다부터 말 류노이가라 류노그라와스 강가 마마고 괜찮아 세시오스 라마 자침보지가 말 류노그라와스 대고근디와 류노이가 다 피투노이가라 아니 단다 yenje sendi tise mare runge sendi tise res chichi lebares pejanol
Yengi sem tutsu
dei tise mares yejin dei tise mare
Loso.
soso ge sendi tise res
Loso, loso. So there is a story actually related to this, and it was about a great siddha, a great yogi who was giving an oral transmission. And as he was giving the oral transmission, he came to a point in the text he was reading where it said that now is not the time to focus on the welfare of others. It is time to focus on oneself, on one's own mind. 소소 돈한테 얘기 주세요.
soso ge sendi tise res 그서로
It is the time to subdue one's own mind rather than working to subdue others.
tene lama de tit tela tene halevi tene sete lovonda고 슈네라 halevi mita mishi shonela sushi de bajaja ki shuan chundiwas
And when he came to those words, then the siddha, he felt very sad. Tears came from his eyes, and he said, I have to set the teaching aside. And he actually ended the teaching session.
tene o 손님이 마트에 윤주지인 거 주바레스 수시 윤주인 거 지수그리 오때 테네 대가로 미스도 여기 슈마레스 야레스
Ale, loso, loso. And then the next day, he actually decided to have the session again. And he explained that he had ended the session so abruptly because he was moved when he was reflecting on the fact that he needed to tame his own mind. But of course, in terms of sort of setting the session down when things are still going well, this isn't so important for the more experienced practitioners who are familiar with the practice, but it is important for those of us who are beginners.
하고서라 개자님보시 헬레 이미깔고 야나 하고서라 다른 이마 용주 튀그리고 가워지 용도 왔어.
It's the same, actually, this approach to meditation that we can have in our interactions with people. If we make sure that when we're interacting with others, we end the conversation on a point where the other person is feeling relaxed and where we're in agreement and where we get along well, that person is going to want to meet us again. And we're going to want to meet them again, aren't we?
따뜻해 파 야비 갈때에서 마대와 녀단다 워치 요비 돈이 여기 나 터네 유주 티알 가오메기 전으로 왔어.
But of course, if the conversation ends at a point where we're having a disagreement or where the other person is somehow upset or something like that, we're not going to be in such a rush to meet them again, are we?
어다 땡에 들어가서 말이다. 어떤 봐서 벤이 요스 다 숨겨래.
So this is an example contained within the scriptures, Geshe is saying, of the holy beings, not just his own.
어다 때 못와서 다 된다 때래. 다 이제 유주가 된다. 다 손지시 공부 되기. 다 되기 된다. 다 만노 다 차송하지 와있다. 대만도기.
So then, leaving it here, then we need to be able to achieve the state of complete enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And in order to do that, we need a practice that is both complete and unmistaken.
요 때래 다 저기 두아 다 때래 다 멜로던데 간저 뇨레던데 다 뇨레 세난다거래 멜로 세난다거 때던데 토니다 같이 뭐 용인주의 써요 알아왔 디노니 다 니지 때라
So then in terms of this king of prayers, which as we explained before, is not just seen as a prayer, but is actually seen as a presentation of a practice. We know that it is divided into the portions of the beginning, the middle, and the end. And in terms of the middle of the prayer or the actual text, there are 16 points. 추측라.
다 멜로지 보세요. 말다 단단히 놀래던데와 학과사라와 아니 대한테서 그 아래스.
And when we go through these verses, don't think of them as merely prayers, but actually really think of them as instructions for practice.
다 뒤눈에 다 찌르바데 찌르바데를 다 가시요바 찌르바데는 요 아래스 단단한서.
And so we are on the point of the actual text of these 16, and Geshe believes that we are at number 15 actually.
다 찌르바데를 말 정아바데라고 한다. 정아바데를 소지가 지스로 봐서 근데 와스 지스로 봐서 지선로와. 지스로 봐서 그래스.
So then in terms of these 16, we said we were at number 15, and number 15 is about like actually becoming a follower of the Buddha. So that's what it is talking about.
다 손지가 지선로와 된도 차와래. 다 손지선비 지선로와 된 손지선바 니야레스.
And so then having dedicated ourselves as a follower to the Buddha, we then dedicate ourselves as followers to the Bodhisattvas. And in terms of the Bodhisattvas that are mentioned in the prayer, they are 2 in number. And in terms of those 2 bodhisattvas, we covered the verse that was talking about the bodhisattva Samantabhadra. And so now we come to the verse about the bodhisattva Manjughosha or Manjushri. So why do we speak about Bodhisattva Manjushri in this sense, right? Because we often speak about Manjushri as a Buddha. Well, we understand that this was Manjushri displaying a Bodhisattva aspect, because Manjushri displayed a Bodhisattva aspect while Buddha Shakyamuni was in the world to sort of facilitate the teachings. But actually, we understand that although they're appearing in the Bodhisattva aspect, that ultimately beings like Manjushri, beings like Kshitigarbha, beings like Samantabhadra, they're actually fully enlightened Buddhas. Page 9. So we are on the 3rd verse from the bottom. I shall give rise to the aspirations of Manjushri. And so this is really a prayer to be able to engage in the same kind of cultivations and activities as Manjushri himself. I shall give rise to the aspirations. Ale.
그네 겨와 좀보시 비신 좀바치는 멜로시아 바죠.
Listen. So I shall give rise to the aspirations of Manjushri for this bodhisattva practice of all-embracing good to perfect these practices without discouragement or pause in future aeons.
그래서 다 손주 선반 좀바 세대한테 다 단다도 말에 손지래 되네. 다 손주 선반 요래 디가디나요. 딩가레 많이 봐.
Jumpa labdi di jumpe yang roa, gyawa jumpa mare. Nga dela tenetes go tongson.
말은 좀비 요래. 손주 선반 좀바 세근데 와서.
Loso. Yeah.
손주 선반
Loso. Teni sunam.
어서 시워스. 아니 그네 겨와 좀보시 비셔. 겨와 좀보세나 디가디나요. 손주 선반 요래 버길 데데야 이자 그네 겨와 좀보.
So I shall give rise to these aspirations and practices. This is speaking of the importance of always engaging in that positive conduct.
그래서 다 손주 선반 좀바 드니스네 유여바 노지 하고서라 마고바 나로요. 가디나 쇼와 메바. 셀 쇼와 메바. 셀 강에 메바. 뽑아 첨보 하고서라 드네 템비토네 되죠.
To perfect these practices without discouragement or pause in all future eons. So this means that I want to engage in those same practices that he did continuously with a courageous attitude, right? Without setting them aside.
대이 샤와 말리 주바 저 손주 선반 좀바가 다 코로 손주 선반 임비가 타니 야 생제 대책 대드기 멜로 뭐자요 라와스 디 샤와 강가 멜로 잡아도 인 나로 로기 더도 봐서
For the bodhisattva to practice of all embracing good to protect these practices. So based upon the prayers that he made working for all sentient beings, I want to accomplish the same things.
그래서 다 던지지 그게 다 칸이라요 등가서 리라버와 다 셀 소왕이네 질레바 이네 가디이나 뽑아도 됨바 다른 니빠도 됨바 아니 또도 됨바시 다 대토 야르세야레스.
So of course saying this aspiration from our mouth is easy, but if we are really able to take it and mix it within the mind, this will become the cause for us to be endowed with the power and with the courage to be able to achieve it.
땅아주 때멜롱이네 온도기잖아 말이에요. 소소 다저다. 손주 선반 좀바가 내가 가르쳐 봐레세리 아고서와 손주 세시 비깔라 다야 보게 니빠 침보 또 침보 차비깔라 아니 슈즈 따위 슈즈 손주 세시 비토네 아니 손주 살페 바레스
Yeah. And so also in terms of being able to bring forth that same aspiration as Manjushri, the same power of mind as he did, if we're really wondering whether we have met that level, we understand that in fact Manjushri as a bodhisattva gave rise to the shepherd-like bodhicitta, guiding all beings to enlightenment before himself. And we understand that out of the three types of bodhicitta, right, this shepherd-like bodhicitta is the most powerful but also the most difficult to arise.
다자 템바카르. 다알에 기스고로 마시러와. 다 모치아지 다 모치아서 가르 다 잡었다 비세지 다 몸보지 러와스도.
Yeah. And so most beings, of course, they will arise bodhicitta in the king-like bodhicitta, right? Achieving enlightenment first and then leading others there.
된디바지. 리송아. 다 디체 다 멜로 리송이. 다 니지가 멜로 첨보 쭈르 녀레 쭈르 된도 차와레스.
And so with this verse, I give rise to the aspirations of Manjushri for this bodhisattva practice of all embracing good to perfect these practices without discouragement or pause. We have completed the 16 verses of the main body of the prayer.
다 멜로 첨보 쭈르 잘라바이나 다 고도 멜로든 다 연돈 데비토니다 레가 체토나 하고서라 타네 야니 바치모 저야 아르마도 다 멜로 찌보잖아 아니 양고도 멜로 니가 녀도 저는 니바체가 멜로 찌보지는 니바테 추가레스.
So then also we understand that having made these aspirations and these prayers, the 16 in the main body of the practice, we then need to engage in the practice of dedication. Because if we just leave it there without the practice of dedication, the merits will be more limited. Whereas if we engage in the practice of dedications, they will be empowered and protected.
어따테 몸보지도 하고 그러와서 달래 또 뭐하는 거 사태 사바이나 뭐도 멜로니라다 뭔다와 그 뭐아이라 멜로 ngwa yila mar melo yila ngwa mayimba ane ta tini ne se yawa te yares.
And so when we speak about prayers and dedications, perhaps for those of you who are newer and have not heard this before, we speak about prayers that are dedications and prayers that are not dedications. Munam nanglula ngoa yimpagi munam dang ngoa mayimpagi munam.
Oyo te ya wata ngwa yina kanga melo re de yares. Melo yina kanga ngwa re yo mares.
So what that means is that every dedication that we make is a prayer, but not every prayer is necessarily a dedication.
Ta ngarusu jamia pimpi ta mi tane se namande ane ne se yo pochi hakosona ta ngayo tene magobana tene ji wa shu za la ba yina ta te melo chi bore ma to ngwa re yo mares.
So if we, for example, look at the somebody michi gyabo sona de nga di nang shin che tu
o che to ba shu za la ba yina ndogere yona shonji se to ya to ba shu ne ya sonje to ba shu ta ga ji la ba yina melo re.
So if we make an aspiration, for example, looking at the bodhisattvas or looking at the Buddhas and thinking what they have done excellently and achieved, so may I also do excellently and achieve. That kind of aspiration is a prayer, but it is not a dedication.
Ta sen ya magobana senje tonje te do to ba shu za ta ga ji la ba yina ane o ta te melo yo re hali ni ba chi mo ya po do re te ngwan ro yo mares.
And similarly, if you think that through may I be able to achieve the state where I can work towards the welfare of sentient beings in the very best way, that is also the example of something that is a prayer, but not necessarily a dedication.
Ta so so gom da ba ja kamanga se gom ja ba yina ndogere kamanga se ta loju gewa ke thol sa so no to ne loju che ba yina ta te chan ne la lo so te ne gewa te jel ja ne cha la ja ne la o ta di gewa te she ba la te ne and ne de ji yo shu za la ba yina wa to me lo ni ka cha yo res.
However, for example, if you engage in the practice of study or meditation, even just for 5 minutes, you're bringing forth those positive mental qualities, and at the end of the session, you say that with these merits as my object of focus, through these merits, may I achieve the welfare of all sentient beings. That is a prayer and also a dedication.
다 던디 gewa ya gewa soso gewa ji do cha ba chi gewa te she wa ji ma mali to bi jelen do wa shu za la ba yina ya she wa ji ma mali to cha so na ge ne ba zo do se ya res.
And then when we speak about this dedication, there are dedications that are limited. So what would be an example of a limited dedication? We engage in the practice and then we say, through these merits that I've accumulated in this session, may I achieve a higher rebirth. Once you get the result of that, for example, being reborn as a human, the positive karma that you dedicated is exhausted.
다 때 타바 토비 jelen do wa shu za la ba yina so dan so so taba to so no de ni ba zo do ya re ta sunji tobi jelen do wa shu za la ba yina so ji ma to pa ge in jivitel so so ta ka wa
And then similarly, if you dedicate it for liberation for yourself alone, once that self-liberation is achieved, those merits are exhausted. But if you dedicate those merits to the point of enlightenment, they will abide until you reach that point of enlightenment for all sentient beings.
I
asked if I could ask a question, but apparently not at the moment. Okay.
So in
the sutras, so in the collected verses of the Buddha, and I'm sorry, I can't give you the word-for-word translation, but I understood the meaning. It is said that when a drop of a virtue is added into, when a drop of water is added into a great ocean, as long as that ocean abides, the essence of that drop never dissipates. In the same way, when dedicated to the vastness of enlightenment, those virtues will never be exhausted. That's the gist of the verse. Yeah. So if you don't dedicate your merits are just like water in a cup. And then once you're finished drinking from that cup, those merits are exhausted. And so in that way, actually, many of the virtuous or positive things we do, because we're not mindful and we don't dedicate, their positive potential can be exhausted relatively quickly.
다
actually.
자서 첨보는 유자바이는 자서 첨보 마주 바다 치티 코로 메타브니 바테 라테 알아was.
But we know that if we put that cup of water into the ocean, as long as that ocean does not dry up, some of the essence of that water is going to abide there.
다 대지 코 레라워 지레 되는 가서 미야 야보시라 셰토요 말에 스탄 야분이 뭔고 고도네 된다.
And actually, the practice of dedication is something that is very easy to do, but often we find ourselves forgetting to do it. And that's because, we are still under the control of the afflictions, and that can make us distracted.
다티 이제 될었더니 ng와도 멜로가 쳐바티에서 로송와서 대지하고 그시 같이 뭐다 니지데 저때 저르데 정안도 차
So then, in this way, we have covered the difference between prayers that are dedications and prayers that are not dedications. And actually, Geshe said we haven't finished the 16 because we said we're in the 15th verse. So there's one more verse. His go on.
다 저르 방이지 멜로 뉴이도 와테레스 멜로 차서 뉴이도데요.
And so then the last verse is kind of the very end of the section of the actual prayer.
시바탄 제 마지지 예데노주 제주메바슈 시바 제메발라 니네주 대다차와 토제 차와 저스
May my pure activities be endless, my good qualities boundless, and through abiding in immeasurable activity, may I actualize infinite emanations.
다 디서가 손지칸가 로로가 다시와 야벌로 가로서 체자 토야메바지요 알아와스 시바 이거 유서가 시바 체자 토야죠.
So in terms of the 3 times Buddhas of the past, present, and future, in terms of their activities and qualities, they are impossible to enumerate. In other words, they are uncountable.
어따든지 요바 노지지 가로서 대 노지 버게 뇨레도 하카사라와 다시와 체메바지도 토바쇼 나머지.
And so understanding that, then, may I also engage in those similar activities and achieve a state where I can have countless emanations.
디서와 아니 예데노주 체주메바쇼 세다 손지가 깨예데 순게예데 투게예데 라요 다바 체네 체주 토야메바지요 아래.
And so when we say immeasurable activity, we understand the immeasurable activity are because the activities of the holy body, holy speech, and holy mind of the enlightened beings are impossible to enumerate. So may I also be able to bring forth that similar power and capacity.
체메발라 니니 좀 대다차와 토제 차와 저사데 소소유더니 소야티야 링와 예서가 시바 요보 체메바텔 데니라 하고서라와 아니 소야 수제도 전제 삼바 코로서 멜로 자바노 닐레카트 말
And so by engaging in those positive activities of body, speech, and mind, of following their example, may I achieve that state of infinite emanations through the blessings of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas.
This one, 다 뭔가 버세리다 저절 투면 로봇이 저거 야래. 이내 전에 예티 다좀봐.
Mogapu.
뭔가봐.
Geshe.
좋아.
Yeah.
저거 투면이래.
So, when we speak about infinite emanations, tomeres, yineko nientu matop marewa.
다테 알지도 뭐. 시도 예티 다좀봐라와스. 다좀봐다 예시도 저거 코 투면 할래. 깨라 제주지 저거 야래.
So when we speak about infinite emanations and immeasurable activities, often we speak about these miracle powers or the legs of emanation. Then when we speak about the great disciple of the Buddha, Modgalyayana, he was the supreme in those kind of activities, even though according to common perception he was a foe destroyer, not a Buddha. However, despite him being the most preeminent here disciple in terms of those miracle powers, when his mother had passed away, he was not able to discern where she had been reborn. So he had infinite emanations that he could send out looking for her, so he was searching for his mother everywhere, and also he had supreme cities of being able to read the minds of others, but despite that clairvoyance and those miracle powers, he was unable to locate her.
다 냐모가 잡혀 바샤가 전네라 코체 도봉에 시요하르 저 요하르테네 통토요 말이에요.
So he asked the Buddha, he said that I've achieved this state of a foe destroyer, but yet I am not able to locate where my mother is and to be able to help her. So why is this the case? And he said that as a foe destroyer, you have defeated the afflictions, but the imprints left behind, the latencies left behind, are preventing you from reaching that high enough state to be able to locate her.
tani shonshu yezeje 사다 내치라 사자치라 할래와 tani bekang에 첨보기 돈이 요비 로지 요아레스
Jangchub.
shonshu yezeje 내세 사자나고 지레다.
And so there was a place called Jangchub Ozerchen. So I think it's something like Great Radiance. Ozerchen is Great Radiance. Ko amala dela yerewa.
강에 첨보기 돈이 다 되고
And his mother was in this land called Great Radiance, and she was enduring like unbelievable difficulties.
다 tani 전에서 안에 다로 봐서 이러지 돼요 사레스.
And finally, he was able to locate her. Kanderatores bakchak mebasone.
말은 다 손지게 수사하러 왔어. 들들들이 강에 들들들이 되세나.
And then through the Buddha telling him where he was, Mogalyana was able to go to that place and help her.
다 던지지 다 손지게 돼서 아데 체주야 매바 다 배할래 된지 두와 성에 되세요 알았어.
So in this way, we understand that even compared to other beings who possess great qualities such as clairvoyance and so forth, the Buddha's qualities are much more impressive. In this way, immeasurable.
던지서와. 던지서 다디 저는 가리 주주기 지스르.
Is it?
너때 맞힌두와.
Yeah.
다 주기 샤와텔 다 그룹하게 테스트해서 요아레스 너때 지바시아바.
Yeah.
다 주기 샤와.
Yeah.
가서 용인 주서 요아레스.
Yeah. So now we've come to the part of the text which are the activities to come at the end. So up until the end of these 16 points, this has been the actual text. So it's kind of like the actual session. And now we come to the conclusion.
단디 맞지 전에 멜로 강기가 준주던다고 연주시 있어요. 너기 다도 쳐봐 저좀 뭐 세제만에 다요 대지도 저저 레도니 뭐다 너기 멜로 다요 대저 뭐.
So limitless is the end of space. Likewise, limitless are living beings. Thus, limitless are karma and afflictions. May my aspirations reach be limitless as well.
다 단기 멜로 줄이 다 유인다고 지ren데 유던다고 지ren데.
So Geshe said that this is kind of like the stone or the boundary marker. This verse is like a boundary marker at the end of the actual session. So at the end of those 16.
다 가르친 게 요아레스는 너가 가자 사들 생제가 차봐 지ren데.
So we know that just like space is unbelievably vast and we can't pinpoint an end to it, so similarly those beings abiding in samsara are unbelievably vast and have no end.
다 생제 가와 차봐 이나이 다 지지반 요아라 와서 레더니 뭐가 되는지 차대도 나오지 강에 되냐.
And however vast those sentient beings are and however far they may reach, we also understand that they are bound by karma and affliction. And so in this way, karma and affliction are limitless as well.
다 대누지 징아로게 이나이 링과 예서가 돈이 다 비생제 가샤 사텔 다 거르고 강에 요아 이사 텔퍼게 펜바도 다 멜로 타이바지 야기.
And because those beings are innumerable and because their karma and afflictions are limitless, for that reason, if we want to help those sentient beings, our aspiration needs to be vast and limitless, just like space.
디스와 어다 멜로나 소속 멜로이나요 다 링고 어다 멜로 가르게 야 소속 빙이네 이제 여보 제바 얘네 가서 자자이사 너가 가자 사텔 다 생절 뱀바도 대치기.
So we make a prayer in this way that may I use my body, speech, and mind in a limitless way to reach all sentient beings as vast as space.
어다 지만 주기 샤와테 다 지만 거 주의 간서 대서 맞 요아 말레스.
So then we come now to the conclusion part of the prayer, and Geshe said, in terms of the concluding part of the prayer, fewer talker points. So we're almost talking points. So we're almost at the end of this text.
다 멜로 집어 말아봤어. 다 멜로도 레이 돈에 다 가서 세 조망 인에서 그때 세레서 저 타도 시란 이거 눈에 다저 타도 돼 시락 배제도 그 아래스.
So then, of course, we understand that prayers are beneficial, but in terms of what is actually going to help us actualize the transformation of our mind, it is really these two practices of method and wisdom. And out of these two, it is wisdom that is preeminent.
다 롱페나 롱가 야본다 버티 샤바도 니지도 상주 세테지 롱가 야본다 버티 데야레스 롱가 야보테는 퍼겐도 다 바체 퍼강아 자면서 그때 다 시라고 베체도 그 야레스
Barche me basoya. So we can think of love, compassion, bodhicitta, and the practices of method as the actual road that we are traveling on. But we understand that this road has many rocks and other obstacles. It is through the practice of wisdom that those obstacles can be eliminated.
다 대표 로지 요바테 다 퍼게 tumba 텐주 tum바니 퍼게 조서야지 노아마 가로서 노아마샤 바다 다 따다지 퍼게 로토고 야마레스 야레스
And until we actually bring forth this wisdom that is able to see the relationship between both emptiness and dependent arising and see how emptiness and dependent arising complement each other, we will not be able to get rid of those obstacles effectively.
다 니미자 조 데텐데 때반은 조 대주주 대닝 바 좋은로야 진짜 시작이 야레스
And in fact, this dependent arising appraise of the Buddha by Lama Tsongkhapa, it is really explaining the symbiotic relationship that emptiness and dependent arising have with each other.
라마 총가 버 코로이나요 다 tum바니 당연에 tum이야 또야 다 tum바니 녜네 세게 말에 러와 고잔이 티소 고스치네 고모모 잔네라 고조치네 tum바니 라피 jel에 용조 고잔네 tum바 텐주 tum비 졸 통고 됐네 페 할레네라 순시도 될 때바트 피바레스
And this song or this poem is really a poem of experience from Lama Tsongkhapa, who was engaging in hearing, contemplation, and meditation, trying to bring forth that wisdom realizing emptiness. And then at that moment of his realization, he saw how emptiness reinforces dependent arising and dependent arising underpins emptiness. In that way, he was amazed at the true meaning of the teaching of the Buddha, and he composed this praise.
tum바세나나 테스 텐유네 테스 리라가 저거 야레스 tum바세나나 다 녀모 간디지나 키위요 somma 노지 메바치 다 tum바치 저거 야레스
So when we speak of emptiness, perhaps this is the easier one to understand. What is emptiness telling us? It is telling us that through the lens of the affliction, that object existing in the way that it appears is empty of existing in that way.
단지 마리바치 볼라 마르다스 내 차이너레 콘트로이너레 나자이너레 코르 라파레도 참모레레 손스 요하레스
So this isn't just true with the ignorance grasping at the self, but also with the other afflictions like attachment, anger, jealousy, and so forth.
다 라파데 데즈 리라가치 요하레스 다 참모들라 그 루지지요바 하코서라 보게 손스 참모지 요하레스
And all of those afflictions have kind of coarser and more subtle aspects. So seeing that the appearance of the object on the coarser level is not the way it appears is a little bit easier. But on the subtler level, we're seeing how through the lens of that affliction, we're grasping at that object as being inherently or truly existent. And that is more difficult to eliminate.
다 고기네 자야 버쳐봐 이는 tum바테 라야라 다테 다 tum바도 텐주니 그노네 다 tum바 코로라야 데즈 리라가치 저거 야레스
And so when we're actually in the process of meditation,
가로서 고자야 버쳐봐 이나 또야 tum바 지보라야 될 텐니 그노네 오테즈 리라가
Tenjung Leilawa, Tenjung Tramo,
마르마 컨지 조데 로알레 tum바 텐주 조 텐주 tum비 조 샤야지 알아와
hakoso. So when we are engaged in the meditation on emptiness and dependent arising in this way, it's actually easier to comprehend how emptiness reinforces dependent arising. And understanding how dependent arising underpins emptiness, that is more difficult to comprehend.
하코서라 왔어 다 tum바 퍼게 하코 차네라 다 뚱한테 로지치 접바 때네 뭐도 넘바 접바 때네 뭐도 때네 매반레 뭐도 때네 따바지 요바지 노아 샤야테 대 차그네 파야레야게 네지 유아르스
So when we are focusing on that emptiness and we see that that object is not self-existent, it does not exist from their own side, there is no inherent existence whatsoever. However, it is not non-existent because it is a dependent arising. When we really understand that on the experiential level, that understanding is something really amazing.
다 계자 뭐 알레 못하도 근데 와서 다 디체도 단디님에서 대신 뭐 자기 아레스
And so that is really kind of what this text is explaining.
리송아 다 가져도 담아 뒤셔와
nganso namka me tokro.
말아 로지 도바 메비셔 치노 로진가야나 냥엔디바 마르시 찍그 도바 메바수
Okay, so
Jojo
we,
bad.
we are on verse number 16.
하텔로에 뭔데
nganso kawadu rangjin dopa me pe chie shwa.
데레레
I have a different translation than the Gavin Kilty one, and they seem to be, I'm going to go with this translation, I'm sorry, because it makes sense to me here. You taught that if any phenomena had the slightest inherent existence, nirvana could not be achieved nor elaborations undone, because a self-existent essence could not be reversed.
리송아 아 로지 도바 단디 슐로 같이 이티 가르세게 가르세는 로지 지트바 가시 여바이나 되니 타바세야 쳔님 용 토야 메바 쳐도 그래
So what this verse is explaining is that if there were even a tiny bit of inherent existence, elaborations could not be undone, means that actually liberation would not be possible. That is really what is being said here.
리송아 미 간디세게 가르세는 로지 도바 메비셔스 토송아
Yeah.
로지 세르 로지 지트바
Yeah.
하커서 가 로지 지트바 가지 여바이나 도바 메비셔사데 아니 마리바 도야치는 메도 그래
So what this is saying is that rangjin indicates inherent existence or natural existence. Dokpa means reverse. So if things had an inherent nature, a truly existent nature, reversal, in other words, liberation, would not be possible.
리송아
지송.
데레 미타 텔리라 미야 미카 간소 알레 그 소아도 릴라보 마르와스 아니 로니 신호 로지 지트바지 가시 롱게 세도 녀모강가 로지 지트바이나 아니 녀모강은 저와도 메바 전도 요아레스
So to put it in a simpler way, because maybe when we look at the verse it's not so easy to understand, if we would think that there is inherent existence, that would mean that the mind existed inherently, which would mean that the afflictions exist inherently. And if the afflictions existed inherently, it would not be possible to defeat or reverse them.
노징 아주 깨잘라요 떼즈 용기 요아레스 빼나 멋티 시가 여보지이나 하고서라 시가 시방 연바지 요나 시가 늦어지 요나 하고서라 경험시한테더라미 다키 시바 여보든 저와도 야말 그 이름 멋티 로지레 다 노징 아주 깨잘 요가치 이네트니 라그라와스
So if we are thinking about this, let's personify this as an example using people. You might have a person who is very agreeable and easy to get along with, and you might have a person that is a very difficult, badly behaved person. And when we speak about that difficult or badly behaved person, we might say that's just his or her nature, right? In other words, that's just the way that they are.
요가도 네가 니깔게 됐어 노지 배제 도요
And we might also say that about the pleasant person. Oh, they are just, good natured. They are just kind of naturally positive. And that makes both of those people, the good one and the bad one, seem kind of static, doesn't it?
다 대도 민조도 메바 로도 말아와스 이나 노징 아주 배제 도요 아레스
And actually, it's not that neither person can change, right? Both the wholesome and the unwholesome person can change, but we just tend to label people in this way as kind of possessing a good or a bad nature.
다시 시월라요 시바냥 바시와요 보는 저완도야 디디시 하고서라와 시바마 파지니까 저와요 시워요 아레스
But of course, we know from our experience that a very fine, upstanding person can easily be degraded into an unwholesome person. And we also know of people that maybe were unwholesome and made a lot of mistakes who eventually become good, upstanding people.
미텐디를 때스 배도요 아르다스 로제사 때라 저완도야 메바치 도바 메비셔 사든 저완도 전에 코 도야메 비와마레스
So this word rangjin, which is, I translate it as natural existence. It's not, it has that idea of it being that natural way. younger Sundang, Rangjin?
세준은 도야면도 그래. 매바 쳐야면도 그러스.
And if we think of something as having a nature, that makes us think that's just the way it is, right? It's not going to change.
어때래? 다 된데서나 다 치노 로진 가요나. 아니 냥엔디 바 마루시 시월에 당이 라야 돼.
Yeah.
로지 잡아진 가시 요바이나.
Yeah.
아니 냥엔렌 디바 스니몰레 디바 사드면도 그래.
However, if things were inherently existent in that way, then elaborations could not be undone, which means that nyangin depa mirungs, which means that nirvana or liberation is not possible.
냥엔렌 디바 좌사 면도 그 제세 가르레 잘라바 이는 찌꺼 도야면도 와 시타마테 찌꺼.
Yeah, chikutamam.
찌꺼 세나. 예. 찌꺼 세나 짜와 뒤에서
Ale.
자와 뒤에서 다 그렇게 코인여라 강아지여라 와스 콘여와로야 면도 그러 와스.
Oh, okay. And so if that reversal is not possible, that means that drukunsena duksum, right?
미미 찌꺼세나 녀드게자 될랬다게 하면 찌꺼세나 자와 뒤에서 대체
Yeah.
디가 찌빠 그렇다완다원다 만다지 코인여단 체준다 만다지 와라 와스.
So the elaborations here mean the elaborations, all of those appearances that are arising in conjunction with the three poisons of attachment, anger, and ignorance.
그래서 어때 도야면서는 તને 뉴데스야 면도 그래 타바사 도야면도 가레스.
If those three poisons could not be reversed, the elaborations would never cease. And if the elaborations are unceasing, then liberation from samsara is not possible.
다 제세
Gonda. Pray. Allergen.
알라지 그텔마데 데스와 어다 녀데 데스와 어테레 데이자 로지 있어봐 때네 요 말다 생각할 텐다.
So in this way, there is not even a tiny bit of natural or inherent existence.
어이 다 되게 제텐다 버봐. 디시 로지 노타시 생기 다이 요요도 아니 케피 소스 레스바 달라 시 고와니.
Dechi rangjin namcha she senge jai yang yang du. Right? So I'll go back to our original text. I'm sorry, I was just confused by the translation for that previous one. But we'll go back to the text. We're middle way on page 2. You spoke therefore with the roar of a lion again and again on this absence of nature.
데소이.
Jisung.
어다 제세 디시를 당기 제생만 연시에서 와스.
Yeah.
로지 잡아 요나 타바라사 요 말에 아니 녀모 강간 저완로야 요 말게 저 모시에서 와스.
So this is saying he spoke again and again, right? The Buddha spoke again and again on if things were really existent, there could be no change in those afflictive emotions, and therefore liberation would not be possible.
어다 제세 던질라 때네 디시 로지 노타시에서 소지 쪼된 되게 시간이 지나 영아로서 강에 가디나 강에는 내가 말해. 시간가로로 로지 잡아 요 말해.
But the Buddha tells us you do not need to abide in this state of difficulty because none of those afflictions or elaborations exist inherently. Therefore, they can be cleared away. And so having spoken that, he spoke that with the roar of a lion.
하고서와 어다 생기단 문제 같은 로지지 요 말해. 사한테 다트 잡아 이자. 될 스치가 말해 사한테 라요 말해.
So saying with that lion-like roar that there is no phenomena that exists inherently, this is speech that is so exalted that no one would dare challenge it.
데스와 어다 나르스 민지밤가 민지밤가서나마데 아니 가와 가르치 주야 로지지 매 이자 녀모 간디지나 저와도 해요아리 코로스 손세테 요 말해스.
So this lack of inherent existence is an encouraging thing because it tells us that the afflictions are not inherently existent, right? And because of that, then the appearances that we are seeing do not exist in the way that they appear.
어때야 자와티 인데 봤지. 다원은 로지지 똥 자세 근데 왔어. 로지지 똥 세한테 똥 세한테 세대 고사 먹어 요아레스
랑징기 통 가오이시.
당긴다 사성와스
알레 랑징기 통. 레.
대주도 제목이 생기게 전에
알레.
로지지통에서 지 먹을래 용도 와스
So we'll see empty of natural existence, rangjingi tong, this idea of being empty of natural existence. This is a phrase that will appear many times in the teachings.
ngazo rapa kanise hakko garesene ti tonse te kanise zalabaina pena goma nikala shoyo marwas tin nikala goma te shoyi tonare
So how is it empty of natural existence? We can go back to the example of the cream. Before the cream is churned, it is empty of being butter, right? That butter is not there before the cream is churned.
다 디똥한테 로지지 똥세한테 레베스는 대용 말다
But is that kind of emptiness the emptiness of natural existence? Perhaps not.
대지지 똥세를 연다지 똥세한테 시월래 용도 와스
That's just one thing being empty of being something else, in fact.
다요 쇼차 고마트 쇼차 차소나 다 쇼이니까 로 당긴 거마 고마트 코똥 사리와 말와
And similarly, once we churn the butter and it once we churn the cream and it becomes butter, or once we churn the milk and it becomes yogurt, the butter and the yogurt are empty of being the milk, right? They're empty of being something else.
다 대용 레베스나 로지지 똥세한테 대용 말레스
But is that this empty of natural existence that we are talking about? No.
대용 예동다고 지래도 마도 때는 로지지 똥세한테 레기와 말레스
So you can't understand something being the absence of something else or not being something else as being that emptiness of natural existence.
다 저러서 얘기 소이나 구반이 요아래 간조이나 구반이 요아에서 구반 뒤에 놀라 소소 구반 뒤에 놀라 룸보치 요아래에서는 룸보치 문디와
So for those of you who are at home, and so also for those of you who are here, right? If you look around your room and you do not see an elephant, we say that that room is empty of an elephant. This is an absence. It's emptiness in terms of an absence, right? There's not an elephant in your room, at least hopefully not.
다때 룸보치가 똥하세게 요아래 뒤똥세 대용 레베스 대오 예도래 마도로 도드래요 말레스
And so is that emptiness of absence the kind of emptiness of natural existence that we're speaking about? Not exactly either.
다원나 로지지 똥세한테 빼나 토아림보니 tani 하가서와 도도 tani가 민다고 조져야라고
Do.
도도 시금 때 민다고 조져야라와 맞마트니 요아라와 어ත니 통소나
알레.
뭐머레 소마지 용거라와
Chetang dabuchik sawa kaplu라 joa.
마르마테 이거 말 노실라 마셀 가와이나요 맞마다 워지 지자요나
Yeah.
소소 만다 워지 통소나
Yeah.
파팔레는 코 머레요 말와
Kodores dabuchik tangidwa. So if we think, for example, of another analogy, we can think of some rocks or some trees that are perhaps very far in the distance while we're driving. And because of their shape, initially we think that it's a person. We think that there is a person on the horizon.
다때 그룹을 멍기네 동아래 두아스 뒤동세들에스 간다 로지지 동세한테
But when we get there, we see that it is not a person at all. It's just rocks or a tree. In that way, it is empty of being a person. This is more the type of emptiness that we're talking about when we speak about the emptiness of natural existence.
로지지 동 롱기 동 롱기 동라고 지세야레스
Empty of existing by way of its own character. Empty of existing from its own side. Empty of natural existence. All these phrasings are pointing to the same thing.
어때 동서 라바지가 돈에 다 잘못을 판도야 이나 다네 라바지 와라스
So if we can use this line of reasoning to see how things are empty of inherent existence on the coarser level, we can gradually come to a more an understanding of the more subtle aspects of this.
리송아 다든지지렌두스 디디치다 저거 거래 사르 다원아 빼니 여워지 현대는 디자기 있어
So Geshe said he realizes we're usually at the time for questions, but he just wants to leave you with one more example.
다 로지지 요아레 소노토는 가르스 고 콘로야테 코알 고고 또야테 냐몬 고고 가리스 또 요아자라바 이나스
So how does this idea of things being inherently existent or existence from their own side keep us spinning in this confusion of the afflictions?
pena ngaros ngendi lapa la wacha ne de lapa na karan du ngaros kange o de chin du so lo so pake de chin wa cha yong du as.
The appearance is a little bit like this. If Geshe grasps that booklet in his hand, you see that and you'll say he is holding on to a booklet.
tal de no wa chi sha ge de chin du so pake no wa chi sha ge de ne de zhe chu sa chi yo ba chi pe de pake no wa chi yo res.
And when we look at that book in his hand, it really seems that there is a pinpointable, inherently existent book that he is holding on to.
de san zhe chu sa yo ba zo ke te ne mo ge zo san go ge du sa res.
This idea that there is a pinpointable, inherently existent book, that appearance is an appearance created through affliction.
No man ma to de yo ma re se yo ma das.
Now, keep in mind, we're not saying that there is no book at all, but we're saying this particular mode of appearance of the book is due to affliction.
de roji chi pa zo cha ren zhe chu sa yo ba de si zo cha se ma ri bi zo cha res.
So who had this idea that there is a truly existent book that has a pinpointable essence that exists from its own side? Ignorance is leading to that impression.
다 kale yonju ramba ni pe thone ke cha shen de pa de re kanga cha chong chi pa sha ndo na de re man du kanga re man du as.
So how do we counter this? Well, the first step is to break the book down to its parts. You saw Geshe opening each page. So this page is not the book. This page is not the book. This page is not the book. Then that solid, unitary, pinpointable book, that appearance begins to dissolve.
ta tangi page do do chi de chi du so ba ro chi zhe chu yo ba zo ya de no ta pa chi lo ro si wo chi du as.
And by breaking it down into its parts, this idea of this unitary, self-existent, inherently existent book that we had, that appearance starts to break down, right? We start to see that it is false.
de chi yo du yo ar te ne pom de mo cha shen mo bo chi la te ne de chi ke te ba page yo ar was.
So there is that nominal book, right, that performs a function, but we understand that it is a dependent arising. It arises through the coming together of many causes and conditions, such as the various pages and so forth.
ta te mali in re cha la in re ti pe che de te ze to ba yin na lo so to ma ni ma to na yo ni mo tra po ti ga ani ne ba te nga zo yo to yo ma se yo res.
Chashe droye di ro.
ta cha sha mo bo chi la te ne yo.
So if we break down the objects we encounter, the people we encounter, and so forth into their parts in this way, and we see that they are dependent arisings, depending upon this assembly of parts, okay, that's not the actual realization of emptiness, but just seeing that they are designated on the basis of these parts, it is said to already be able to greatly reduce our afflictions.
ta kale do me wa te ga yo ar was.
So it hinders the afflictions.
nga zo yo ga chi thong so lo so yo ga chi de chu sa chi du ani du ga chi to ne lo so du cha ja thong ba re so no to ne ti yo da yong yo ar se yo ra.
And so it challenges the afflictions from the point of view of we see this object that seems unitary and immediately we reify it as something pleasant and positive, or we denigrate it as something unpleasant and bad. And because of that pleasant and unpleasant grasping at that, we're compelled into many courses of actions, right, that lead to difficulty.
ramba ni pa go pa chen lo ro zo yo ma re. ta tange ta lo so was ta de ro to ramba to mo ti go ne lo so ja.
So Geshe said this is the first way of looking at this.
me ke ja ni ma si ya pa sa tra.
Nipadi kare lago.
se no tan de sa ale o ta tan ri chin ale pe le la wa ra the ya si won di was tan ri to ne pe je to na.
So these are kind of easy examples that you can kind of bring into your head, right? So if you use these easy examples, this will be greatly beneficial.
o ta to mo ge wa ga ti ya sa wa.
So we will conclude with our dedication prayers. Now, Geshe and I also thought to add something to our prayers. We're going to add the prayer for the long life of His Holiness, as well as the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Zhangzhu Zhenzhu Rinpoche Maje Banam Jeju Ji Jewa Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Bewa Reshu Tangni Tawa Rinpoche ma je ba na je ju chi je wa nyam ba me ba yang gon ne gon du be wa shu jang be bao ji da jen ba da kun du zang bo de yang de shen de da gung ge je su da lo che ge wa di da dang che ra du ngo du sun she be ge wa dam she ge ngo wa gong la chu du nga ba de da gi ge we za wa de gung jang zang bo che che ra du ngo wa yi gang ri ra we go we jin gang de ben dong de wa ma lu jong we ne chen re zi wan ten zi jiang zu yi xia bei si de ba du ten gyu ri chi. So the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Dame dumbe gyase nyeran zo lo sang gyewe yabze juba je rajan jinge gyabye male ba dende memba jebe gele zo Yonzu zube de rimbo je shedang zube zinjen be wala nam yang mi zhen zube go cha jen zume je zun lama so wa de bende mali jongwe go je bo gyawe tendo ma jo jo wa yi de la je de je ma je be mo lo bo shi wa shi de yi re ma Hedan josum jazo jela dang jase nang je tu je la bo je alume dembe yang zhe sa wen zhe ge san de je pa de nyu je Su gewa kung sa pati ni pati la tine ta mando milin tele moge to ma tu ne la sa pakar ina passion shishita chi mo toya chi.
Through the merits that we have accumulated together today, may all of the sufferings of this vast world, including wars, conflicts, pandemics, diseases, and so forth, may these be completely cleared away.
Sombang bag lai nere mei nere kandi chi na ya pashi chene somba zum bo toya chi.
May those giving rise to unwholesome, evil thoughts, whether they be humans, whether they be devas, and so forth, may those evil thoughts be completely subsided, and instead may they bring thoughts of kindness and what is wholesome. Through these merits, may the sun of happiness shine on all 6 types of beings within samsara without exception. I myself will help this to happen.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll pause there. Geshe is saying that the question that I was bugging him about earlier, I can ask it now, but actually I forgot what the question was. So if anyone has a question, please feel free.
Anything online, Dave?
So, yeah, Geshe did answer this question I had at the time. When Geshe was... So Geshe mentioned when we see through the book he was holding up,
Yeah.
and let's say we had a delusion in regard to that book, like we had attachment or we had aversion
Right.
to that book.
Right.
If we saw that it was just a collection of pages, then that delusion would vanish. Yeah.
So, did everyone hear the question? Probably not. Okay, so I'll say Dave's question. Sorry, he tried to open his microphone, but because he's in the same room as me today, there was a big feedback thing. So, I think that Dave was asking about Geshe's example with the book. If we see that the book is merely a collection of its pages, will that help to get rid of an affliction of attachment or aversion that may have arisen due to the book? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Nganso di ngama nganso devgi pe di du ra. Kandes lago. Okay. Devgi pe den so shukjang reje tene drogi re dua. Then the shukjang reje la tene dedi drupares di sam hakotsane. Then the deb kola gi dochak yena tangwa yena pet me dro tu girebes.
야야 다 저한테 뭐 신어도 좋았어.
Yes.
너서도 다 간저 때에도 하고 또 그랬더니 너서도 이 비제 된다 딩걸 버게 찔려서나 너서 잡아도 다 동화 잡아도 용도요 말했어.
So yes, so from seeing it as a collection of its pages, that kind of immediate arising of the attachment or aversion to the particular object, for example, the book, that can be stopped. Lamsang yongyo mare. Yine pet me paso.
단데 간저 빌로 대 가르세 가르. 간저 던디지 때에도 하고는 또 너서면 로면도 왔어. 다 좋아 잡을래서나.
Yeah.
너서 대토나.
Yeah.
뭐 잡아도 용도 말했어.
So of course, this is once we have that stable understanding, right, that the book is a collection of its parts. In other words, the pages and so forth. Once we have that stable understanding, then immediately, like, we can't have this immediate arising of attachment or aversion, right? Because we have that immediate comprehension that it's designated on the basis of that collection of parts. But before we become very habituated to seeing it in that way, it's difficult to really undercut the attachment and aversion right away.
pena 무다지나요. 차시 뭐 찔라테네 고소와래. 로지지야 말에 손스트 쉬나? 아니 내가 치니까 니네도 좋아쉬나? 내가 용거 말에 거 와서 내가 제가 소설 배도 와서.
So with a car, for example, if we have a car and we have this understanding that it is not a self-existent car, it is this assembly of like the wheels, the axle, the various parts of the car, and it is a coming together of these causes into that dependent arising, then if we really have that in a stable way, we will not be giving rise to the attachment of that feeling of attachment to the car. Now, we will still be able to use the car and enjoy its function and understand that it is something that is useful, but that strong attachment will not be arising.
pena medo de ina ta 용거 yana pena ganzo medo de liton zalaba ina.
Lutong sa najindag la.
리ton 로이ton.
Loitang.
첸들 리ton 세긴도 와서 너 지간zo.
Ale loso.
첸들 리ton 세 차치면 치들 차치 뭐지랜도 와서.
Ale loso.
하고서
Hago
된 야
리턴
로조노 요아라 와서 첸들 별 리ton쇼.
Ale, yes. Okay.
데 고만요.
Loso.
하고서 대전 치들 지고 사월랜도 와서.
Je.
메돈데 리ton zalaba ina. 메돈데 차제 마시 사람 라기와레스.
Chashi mashesana.
차바 마시. 차비 리ton.
So in the Lojong teaching, it talks about abandoning one's home and abandoning all attachments and so forth. So what Geshe was saying was that in terms of this plant, luma tongsana chashi matong kane?
pena poba te liton zalaba ina. 포바티 메바지 세계요 말이스.
Loso, loso.
차파 마셰 차피 파자스.
But what we're actually saying is don't abandon the object, for example, the flowers or the cup. We're saying abandon the attachment for that object.
뭐뭐지 노는 쳔들리 또는 더 다시 강가셔하기 위해서나 노하셔요. 데레면 와스.
So when people hear these Lojong teachings for the first time, they think, oh my God, I have to like really give up every single possession and even my body, and that's the way to practice. But actually, the hidden meaning is it's the attachment to those things that one must give up.
리동자라바인 로이 동세근도 와스. 로이 동사 다가스 내초하고 파. 차제테 파자 세요레스.
Yeah, so don't leave behind the actual object itself, but instead we understand that we are setting aside the attachment to that object.
다시 메워드르게 와스 마도 메 포바티 리토는 포바티 쫙그 말이 메와서 그 말 소소자되는 거 와스.
Yeah, so if you're practicing those mind transformation teachings, you don't have to smash all of the mugs in your house, for example, because you're going to need to drink some water, you're going to need to drink some tea, but you just have to abandon your attachment to that object.
차제서 대서와 있는 소설 농소 강에 돼야지 그게. 좌파 침보서 차비 나와이나. 로조 tel라테는 강에 돼요레스.
The problem is that when the attachment arises due to the various objects, that's when we encounter difficulties and stress, right? The problem isn't necessarily the objects themselves.
어떤 가서 시와하고 근데 와서 잘라 양년 이유나 할레비 차바체가 tel라진다 지금 때제 지수선 농소 군로 잡고 시월래 그래.
So chala sachen bochi.
사실 뭐지? 사 차제처럼 안 되나 잘라 tel라진다 지금 가는 여자시나 저 누가 안
We see that through our own experience in a really easy way, right? So if somebody in our house breaks something, if it's an object that we cherished, we're going to be really, really upset with them, aren't we? But if it's something that we didn't really like anyway, or we didn't really care about, the fact that they break it isn't going to disturb us.
달리 동세한테 미 자지 야보시 세신도 와스 리동 로이 동세신도 마또 로
루톤스는 수보디로.
말아 로이 동 파자스 딜로테 로 다가제 말아 셈.
Yeah. So when it says abandon the object, we can also say abandon the mind. And when we say abandon the mind, in this way, we're saying abandon the mind of attachment that arises due to that object. Yes, Dave, go ahead.
I'm going to speak up so maybe you can hear. So when I look at how my mind works, when I see the book is a collection of pages, it doesn't change my delusion much. But when I see that the book is a creation of my mind, then it's like, well, what am I doing here? I'm just reacting to my own creation.
Did people hear Dave's comment? Okay, no, they didn't. So I will repeat his comment. So Dave was saying that when he looks at the book as a collection of pages, he doesn't really experience that the delusion connected with the book is decreasing. But when he looks at the book as a creation of his own mind, he's a Chittamantran, Dave. I'm just teasing. When he looks at the book as a creation of his own mind, then he really feels like, oh, like don't be attached to it and so forth, right? It decreases the affliction. Kochena deb chik tana deb di shokdrangi chashe la tene chungares di ko dochak nyungrudrogi omares. Yine deb di sem la tene nangwa chigyure samlo tangna dene korongi dochak tes medrogi dus ko sem sampares la bayen samose.
메메메테도 야 나치는 텐데 요아레스 요비 제세 가레스 릴라 워치 베자바이나 하고서로
Shokdrang samlotane nyurudroya dende yeres. Losa. So Geshe is arguing that he thinks that definitely from breaking it down into its parts of the pages, you can decrease the afflictions arising.
페나 잘라질 베자바이나 잘라디 셜로 치신이 예워 노로 할레비 캔사고 야 캔사고 뭐요 바이나 님반다고 뭐요나 하고서로
하고선 페나 로레다 호지.
로란다 원하지나 졸란도 사와지 파타나 론소 니제고 통화이나 오 노로 차시 남만달라 테네 코지잔도 차시 때지네 때 몸만도 선수시나 노서 잡아테 때지 거네 거로 그랬어.
So take for example a computer that is very beautiful and new and shiny on the outside, but it is made with substandard parts. So if you open up the case of the computer and you see that inside that the parts are like really shoddy and stuff, the attachment that you might have experienced to like wanting to get that new computer, that's going to decrease.
And
Geshe said we could also talk about how to do this in terms of humans, but when we've done the meditation on the various parts of the humans, people haven't really been that into it. So we'll just leave that aside. Yeah.
다 차시 뭐 차시 대요 할래야 되었지 있다나.
Yeah.
아.
하고서.
실로 빠빠 저지래도 만 너로 야버지 따와이나 할래야지 하레스.
Yeah. The miginang.
yeah.
If you think, because we label somebody as attractive, right, as like beautiful or as handsome based upon that initial appearance, but we understand that inside we're all the same parts and organs, and when you think from that perspective, right, that you won't have that same attachment arising to the object. will you?
잘라 야버 저저 지자원 어스레 대오려면 돼요.
Yeah. So if it was true that like the human beings, if we were only our attractive features, if that was the most important part of ourselves, then maybe the attachment would have reason. But we also know, right, that the inner stuff that's important, it's not so attractive at all.
다시로는 그 지신이 저 쉬자가 뭐지지래스.
In fact, it's almost like it's almost like we've painted over some trash or something unpleasant with a very beautiful color, right, that's covering its true nature. You can think of it like that. So at least with the, so I think he's giving this other example as your answer, Dave. So if we use it with like this human example, breaking it down to their parts, right, that attachment that we're feeling can definitely be decreased.
말해.
Geshe.
There's a question in the chat from Zoom.
Yes.
So Martha's asking, when I finish these teachings, I'm going to a jail to visit a person who has asked me to visit him. How can I help him change his bad attitude to a good attitude? Please Lama give some advice.
Marta segin chigyore dene ko sungshu jela ko tsunkangla chik drogogi dua tsumpa chik tu gogires. Dene tsumpa di koran di mi gewe sem kandes yarges tangures kaluk kandes dabo chik nanguresa.
잼바테로.
Tsumpa.
뭐게 세서나.
Ako tanda sem tets kange samlo tangtang dukcha chik dua ruwa di yarge droya kaluk kandes chik nanguresa.
다 소소쟁 코는 대기슈는 당가 할레베티레서 비강이 첨보레서 대주주소노 도는데 돼요 말했어.
So the first thing would be to tell him or her that, now is not the time to be dwelling on the fact that like I am in prison and sort of obsess about your condition of being in prison at the moment.
다 소소 내야티 벌레 뭐지 파세노 그래스.
We can think that by my being in this place, I am actually able to clear a heavy karmic debt.
그래서 또 지대소노 또 가레스. 빼는 아주 뭐지 사는 벌레 뭐 배셔 야대요나. 대파테 사소는 벌레 매소나. 근데 가오지요 알아왔어.
So in fact, like think for example that you're in debt to many different people. You owe a lot of different people a lot of money. If you are able to amass enough money to repay all of those debts, then you'll have the feeling that you are doing something good, even as you're repaying them. So think about the prison in the same way.
당간조 마통와서라 마도 랭엠비 다 벌렌다고 뭐뭐지 할때 뭐뭐지 소소 데데발라테네 존도 그래 대이장가 레레데 소노지 그래스.
So we can't necessarily see it with our eyes, but every unpleasant experience that we encounter, including this experience of being imprisoned, these are the karmic debts that we must repay. So we can think that I am decreasing that debt. I am eventually going to be able to clear that debt. This could be a very positive way of thinking about it.
어찌지는 저거는 가야돼. 어제 소선 담만았잖아. 가 뒤에 멋지게 지소. 강에 뒤에 텔라테네 가지소 대치보소노 또 데도지 뭐요 아레스.
So we shouldn't think that I'm in prison because of this, right? Even if you're in prison unjustly, you think it's because of this person or that decision, right? This is not the way to look at it.
하고서를 첸디게 좀 뭐요 하시. 어감이 좀 뭐요 하자자자 다 가서 전에서 라는 배도 용식을 왔어.
Because we know that being in that situation, it comes from many different causes, and some of those causes may be from this lifetime, but definitely it's possible that some of those causes are from previous lifetimes as well.
다요체 코는 된 할레비도 잘해서 대소노트라 또 그 말에 다시도 거아바 강갈로를 내도 예문이게 제구나 오신대요.
The other thing that he would say is that the prison as a physical building, like, yes, this is a little bit unpleasant, but if you think about all of the sentient beings, they are under the control of karma and affliction. So all beings within samsara are prisoners in that sense of not being truly free, of being under the control of their delusions.
다 거기 세라노를 대요 바치바치조래 마도 다 여왔으라요 말해.
So we're all in this big prison that is called samsara, that is called a cyclic existence. And in this way, his or her situation is not so different from that of the rest of us.
말해. 너마도 가도 강에 주줄 소노 돈에 대나 강에 대주는 치체르마도 배도문이 와스. The last thing that Geshe is advising is like
yes, this is an unpleasant situation, but grasping onto this situation, being in prison, it's so awful, all that's going to do is increase your suffering in relation to the situation. So also we can think about all the beings suffering in this vast world. Some people suffering things much worse than prison. And if we think about the terrible suffering of those other people, this might give some perspective to the person.
강에 첨부 주주소야 주주 다 매와서야 다 야슈 되지레스.
Yeah.
강에 체가 뭐 손노돈이 있어서 될라다는 것 같아 리라고 기워렌다고 소아시나.
So Geshe is just saying that, like, for him, that's like really the easiest and the most kind of effective method when you're in a difficult situation, is to think of all of those beings who are enduring something that is quite a bit worse. And once we have that idea, we have that sense of perspective, then the suffering arising from our situation, it will not be as significant.
따뜻 코러스 집어 말은 안 좋이 집어라와스 대가제 뜻에 좋아디 우도나 디 좋은 정보스로 요아레스.
So not just giving this advice to that specific person, but Geshe really saying from his own experience when he's encountered very difficult situations, it's thinking about those sufferings of other beings enduring far worse that really gives him a sense of perspective, that helps him see that his suffering is not so important.
가디나 강에 주주고 차는 뭐다 와지 야산이 따뜻에 따토바이나. 가디나 헬레 차야지 안 좋이 요아르지 바라와스.
And also just from looking at the situations of the sufferings of those who are in far worse situations, it just helps him to realize that actually right now he's in a relatively good situation compared to many others.
야 디지.
Yeah.
디소이.
Decent.
두주고 사워지 지지는데 어다나스.
이만 뭐 페이스.
예, 저한테는
사모추구 요시 타추니. 지자 라고.
네.
좀.
다디소.
Yeah. Yes.
There was also a question earlier in the chat saying there was 16 types of emptiness.
No.
And how does one distinguish?
돈판이 추축이레스 든소 칸데시오 체그레스기도.
다테 론소도 연거 말했더니 셔동반이 노동반이 셔노니게 동반이 있으면 뭐버져요 아레스.
치 돈판이 낭기 돈판이.
셔노니게 동반이 있어야 한다고 다 메기티게 동반이 전에 다 남는다서요 아레스.
There's different ways of enumerating it. From what I understand, Geshe is speaking about chigi tompani, nangi tompani, right?
다 쪼대 되는 자소는 또 어느
An outer emptiness and an inner emptiness.
하고서 때는 노고 온봉아도 다 노를 때는 뭐 뭐요 아레스.
And also the emptiness of the five sense faculties and so forth.
주동반이 좋아동반이 있으니 다 좋아도 든들 마자는 세 뭐요 아레스.
The emptiness of a form, the emptiness of a feeling.
어다지만 간절 렐레진 바차수.
So Geshe will present these 16 emptinesses in a proper way in the future. Yeah.
너는 뭐 뭐셔도 가이나 뭐 야야 너는
These 16 types of emptiness are mentioned.
돈이 내셔서 한다고 어다든 내서 요아레스.
So in the sutras, you'll find a presentation of 16 emptinesses, of 18 emptinesses, and of 20 emptinesses. And we can come to a discussion of all of these later.
돈이 있어야 한다고 더 디지나.
And if you really kind of take them to their essence, there's 4. Yeah.
다 델리주 디바이는 다 돈이 니로와.
And then if you take that even more to the essence, there's 2.
고사기 다음에 치즈 다음에 니.
The emptiness of persons and the emptiness of phenomena, right? Yeah.
어야 니서 르.
So Geshe thinks to end it here.
다
Unless there's any
드리드니
questions.
뭐서 드링한테 다 디세 뭐.
Yeah. 말에 주어 ngö라 그래. 내가 미쳐서 원년 두기도. Geshe said that he wanted to share a story, but I had just told him that like there was a lot of people that were here earlier that I think have had to go off. So
동사 좋아요는 좋아하는 거 좋아서 좋아하면 원간도 좋아서 시그레스.
yeah. So Geshe said, anyways, it's always, of course, good to have questions, and then when there's no questions,
또
we can tell the
드리드 그야
stories.
노래 나로서 다 칼라를 채요 봐. 세일 세지 리바. 사대도 좋아요 봐 시그레스.
So the story is a little bit about food, kala dang,
칼라도 좋아요 봐. 채리바.
serik
칼라사의 채리바. 칼라를 잡아채 말아서.
like
대도 좋아요 봐 시셔도.
how to eat just to maintain our health, but to not give rise to attachment.
당한조 몸보지 다 몸보지 세치요 말이다. 지시도 리그 채되고 되게 대조 말다스. 칼라 모다소나 તને 칼라를 보게 칼라 채야 봐 맞으나?
Yeah.
다 칼라를 잡아 첨보지는 칼라 모다. 칼라 모다는 데는 리뇨 도차.
Yeah.
리뉴 또 좋아서는 레로 퓨처로 야레스.
So this is really important, in fact, because we have to be sort of mindful and in tune with the measure of food that is enough for our health. So we're not thinking about that in terms of maybe having a strong body only, but also thinking about that in terms of spiritual practice. Because if we eat more than our fill, if we eat more than our measure, then we will feel full and uncomfortable. When we feel full and uncomfortable, we feel lethargic and bored. When we feel lethargic and bored, this gives rise to laziness, which can be an obstacle for our practice. And actually, it is said that overeating, it can actually enhance many of the afflictions, but in particular, it is bad for laziness. And because of that laziness arising, then our wholesome activities such as engaging in hearing, contemplation, and meditation, these can also be hindered.
So
related to that, just giving you a taster. So you have to come back next week. The story will be a little bit about that. So in terms of understanding that overeating is bad for physical health, that's easy to understand. Geshe understands that. If he has a food that he really likes, he eats too much and he immediately feels uncomfortable, but also understanding how it can hinder our spiritual practice. So thanks very much. We'll end the session here. So remember this Saturday, for those following the Chakra Samvara teachings, those will be at 10 a.m. and then we'll have this continuing on Sunday at 10 a.m. Take care, everybody.